Sands National Park is an out-of-this-world landscape. But did you know that it's also home to a space harbor?
And did you know that it's home to historic rocket tests that sent the first Americans into space?
We need to talk about this today on 9 Worlds.
The history of the White Sands Space Harbor begins in 1945 during World War II, when the U.S. Army established the nation's first rocket testing facility and bombing range in the desert around what is now White Sands National Park. Still active today, the White Sands Missile Range covers an enormous area. At nearly 3,200 square miles, it is one of the largest military installations in the United States.
Why build a base in White Sands? This area was likely chosen for a few different important rocket research reasons.
The land was cheap, and a lot of it was already owned by the government. Weather is clear mostly year-round, allowing for good visibility for testing, and the area was thinly populated, so tests could be conducted without putting any communities in harm's way.
Safety and open space were two critical requirements because 1 week after it was established, they tested the first atomic bomb at it.
Named Project Trinity, the test took place at 5:30 a.m. on July 16, 1945. The bomb, nicknamed Gadget, was placed atop a 100-foot steel tower designated Zero, with ground zero at the foot of the tower, where, upon impact, the bomb would create a crater 1/2 mile across and 8 feet deep. The site of this test is now called the Trinity site, and you can visit twice a year in April and October to see the monument erected there in honor of the test.
While the Trinity Test was one of the most dramatic conducted at White Sands, many other important rocket tests were conducted here that helped propel the U.S. into space.
The White Sands site, known as Launch Complex 33, is a historic location for the assembly and testing of German V-2 rockets captured near the end of World War II.
Along with all these rockets came a German scientist named Wernher von Braun. He was widely considered the father of space travel, mainly because he built rockets and he taught people about space travel.
Von Braun's name was so synonymous with space that when Walt Disney wanted to build Tomorrowland's vision of the future at Disneyland, he asked for Von Braun to serve as a technical advisor.
In fact, von Braun helped create and was featured in 3 space-based television shows from the 1950s that Disney created, and you can still see them today on Disney Plus. And I think one on YouTube, because we didn't find that one on Disney+. Moving on.
Von Braun came to America as part of Operation Paperclip, a secret U.S. intelligence program to recruit scientists from the former Nazi Germany to work for the government at the end of World War II. In Germany, von Braun originally helped develop the V-2 rocket, and soon after arriving in America, he came to White Sands with members of his team to help conduct the first test firings beginning in 1946 on the V-2 rockets captured during the war.
The V-2 rocket was the world's first long-range ballistics missile. It was fast, it attacked without warning, and it was virtually unstoppable by the Allies. The V-2 rocket was also the first human-made object to make it into space. Named Bumper, in 1949, this rocket traveled nearly 250 miles up from the White Sands facility.
While created by the Nazis as a tool of vengeful destruction, the technology in the V-2 rocket is what propelled the American rocket program forward and led to U.S. exploration of space. Rocket testing and research continued at White Sands until the early 1950s, when the U.S. Army moved the rocket program and von Braun's team to the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. Here, von Braun maintained oversight of new rockets, including the Redstone rocket family, which developed out of the V-2 rocket technology first tested at White Sands. It was this Redstone rocket technology that carried the first U.S. astronauts to outer space in 1961.
But that's not the end of the space story for White Sands.
Oh no, after World War II came to a close, the next chapter of the international arms race was the Cold War, during which the U.S. found itself engaged in constant attempts to achieve superpower supremacy through technology. By the late 1950s, this would include the race to space between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
At the beginning, it looked like the Soviets were winning, with multiple different spacecraft already sent into space, including Sputnik 1, which was launched in October, 4th, 1957.
When the Soviet Union beat the US into space, it created a total crisis in the United States. The Soviets were winning in scientific and technical advancements. If this continued, not only would Soviet space supremacy challenge America's place as a leader on the world stage, it could also pose a direct military threat.
It was time to get serious about space. The US was upset with Sputnik. In response, they launched multiple different things, including NASA, which was created in 1958.
By 1960, astronauts were training at the White Sands Missile Range for trips to space. And by the early 1960s, NASA established the White Sands Test Facility to perform testing of vital flight systems for the Apollo mission to send men to the moon, a feat successfully achieved with the Apollo 11 moonwalk in July 1969.
This successful moonwalk was only the beginning of White Sands' part in sending people to space.
In the early 1970s, President Nixon formally launched the NASA Space Shuttle program, and in 1976, NASA selected the White Sands as a space shuttle operations and astronaut training facility. For the duration of the Space Shuttle program, pilots and commanders completed the majority of their flight training at White Sands. The White Sands site also served as a backup shuttle landing site, a role it filled only once in March 1982 when Columbia landed there after just the third shuttle flight because weather prevented it from landing at the other two primary sites in California and Florida. And with this landing, Congress officially named this the White Sands Space Harbor. While the Space Shuttle program ended in 2011, the White Sands Test Facility is still associated with the Johnson Space Center, providing a NASA testing ground for materials, rockets, and other components for spaceflight. In fact, testing at the facility and missile range continues today and can restrict access to the park several times a month, so check the website for closures if you plan to visit.
Subscribe if you like the video, watch our other videos, leave some nice comments. It's time for us to jet